My topic is civil liberties, and my proposition is how the use of racial profiling has created a negative impact in our communities. So one claim that how it's created a negative impact is that racial profiling has compromised our future. So it's compromised our future because it greatly affects our children and the youth. Racial profiling also creates a negative psychological impact on children and youth who either witness it or experience it, and it also leads children to having antisocial behavior with one another. So in the article Racial and Ethnic Minority High School Perceptions of School Disciplinary Practices, Ruck and Wertley, they state their concerns with racial profiling in the education system. Their concerns that they stated was that several members of the community, including the African American, Canadian, Latin, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Arab communities, told the perception that children from these groups may be stereotyped as slow to learn and aggressive, and therefore considered to be the instigators of any conflict or problems at school. Behavior that would likely to be assumed to be harmless or just a kid being engaged with another child is seen as threatening if a racial profiled child is involved. Also, for the negative psychological impact on children, a study was done by the American Psychological Association, and it gave numerous submissions of participants that participated in it, and it highlighted the negative social impact that profiling can have on children and youth who either witness it or experience it. For example, the following testimonies were from mothers and parents that participated in the study. One mother stated that her children have been deeply affected, their morale has been tampered with, and their emotional well-being has been destroyed. Another point that affects a profiling school will likely have long-term consequences. One parent stated, if this happens at schools where you're developing ideas and feelings of the world, then how do they expect youth to feel or act when they're out in the workplace or in the real world? So, my second claim is racial profiling creates a sense of mistrust within the community. So it destroys public confidence in our institutions. Many relate racial profiling to fearing their own safety when interacting with law enforcement. And racial profiling has resulted in a general mistrust in oneself when referring or trying to help institutions or law enforcement agencies. For example, so it creates mistrust. In a 2011 report from the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, found evidence of widespread racial profiling, showing that African Americans and Hispanics are disproportionately likely to be stopped and searched by police, even though they're less likely to be found possessing contraband or committing a criminal act. And in this study, it showed that in Illinois, for example, Black and Hispanic drivers were twice as likely to be searched after a traffic stop compared to white drivers, but white drivers in that case were twice as likely to have contraband. Mistrust can be So many racial profiling has resulted in general mistrust in oneself. Profiling undermines it. This is towards their safety regarding law enforcement. So profiling undermines public safety and strains police community trust. When law enforcement officers target residents based on race, religion, or national origin rather than behavior, crime fighting is less effective and community distrust of police grows. A study of the Los Angeles Police Department showed that minority communities that have been unfairly targeted in the past continue to experience greater mistrust and fear of police officers. And mistrust can just be endangered by personal experiences, witnessing an incident of profiling, knowing someone who has experienced profiling, or simply due to the widespread perception that profiling exists in the society. And my third claim is racial profiling produces alienation and a diminished sense of citizenship. So racial profiling makes one feel unequal, or a less worthy member of society. So in the article, The Effects of Racism on Group and Individual Identity, Floor Liger-Steer states that the African American Canadian community in particular stressed that racial profiling is having an overwhelming impact in their community. The sense of injustice that develops among individuals in these communities creates a state of psychological imbalance An inner conflict reinforces their concern that racism exists and that they may be subject to it at any time. And an inquiry by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, they stated that individuals who felt that they had been accomplished much, that they had accomplished much and were contributing significantly to Canadian society contrasted their sense of value. So that's saying that when people are victims of racial profiling and they contribute much to the community, they still feel that they're not as much as important because of that. So whatever they contribute to, that gets taken away from them because of racial profiling. And in conclusion, the use of racial profiling compromises our future through its impact on our children and youth. It creates mistrust in our institutions, impacts our community's sense of belonging and level of civic participation, and impacts on human dignity.
Thank you. All right, well, the proposition's clearly identified. At the beginning of the speech, you have a preview, although it wasn't quite as clear as I thought it was going to be. When you got to the first point in the body of the speech, that's not really signposted. Your second and your third points, though, are pretty well signposted in the body of the speech. There's usually a good explanation of concepts and theories here, but I think one of the problems with the information is that it often remains at kind of a theoretical level. The closest that you come to something that's quantifiable is the one study in 2011 that talks about people who were pulled over in Illinois and the frequency with which they are profiled, which suggests that profiling seems to occur and it's unnecessary, at least in that context. But everything else is really almost self-fulfilling. In other words, it's not just that they're a victim of racial profiling, but they've seen somebody that they thought was racially profiled, or they perceive that racial profiling is going on, and if those circumstances occur, then it's going to have some kind of psychological harm or social harm that goes along with it. That's a pretty broad classification stuff. So if I think something's going on and it's going to have a negative effect, whether or not it's going on or not, it's going to have that consequence. None of that consequence is really measurable, and the impact on it seems a little esoteric and hard to pin down. I think that there are social implications, there are consequences to society. But it would be nice, for instance, if you could document the lack of cooperation with police, or when you talk about alienation. So what is that alienation? Can we attribute social unrest, violent behavior, acting out, unwillingness to participate in civic duties and procedures? Are those examples of the kinds of things that you're talking about? Otherwise, it just seems like, well, somebody feels picked on, and if they feel picked on, they're going to resent it. Well, I wouldn't be surprised that people would resent it. What's the consequence of their resentment here, though? That's where I think there has to be a little bit more substance to the argument. I thought you cited a few authorities to support your position. Like I said, I think you needed a little bit more statistical information, something that we could measure, and maybe a couple of examples. It feels a little bit abstract to be talking about what the harms are there. I think it's nicely presented. You do a good job speaking to the audience, and that helps your presentation quite a bit. All right, thank you.